Hello everyone, welcome to the Bluebeam Revu for Oil and Gas webinar. We're so glad that you were able to join us. I know many of you have busy schedules and you have been calling in from a variety of different time zones across the globe, so we thank you very much for taking the time to take a look at some of the workflows that can be used in Bluebeam Revu. I'm your host, Luke Prescott. I'm also joined by Omar Sheikh, one of our senior application engineers. Hopefully between the two of us, we can answer a majority of your questions. And just want to let you know that there is an icon up in the top right corner where you can select the Q&A portion. Please enter in any of your questions there throughout the webinar today, and we'll be taking a look at those at the end of the webinar. If we are not able to address any of your questions, we will respond to those individually very soon. Also want to let you know that there will be a video recording of today's webinar made available on the Bluebeam training page, and you all will be receiving an email when that is in fact live. Also want to let you know that in the months to come, we're going to have additional webinars to cover additional workflows. So if you have any suggestions for content that we can be covering those, please let us know. We'd be happy to take a look at that and possibly include that in an upcoming agenda. So let's go ahead and get started here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the background of Bluebeam and discuss some of the ways in which Revu is used as an end-to-end tool. Revu is used by a variety of different organizations and users throughout an entire project life cycle, all the way from feasibility through actually managing an asset, a specific constructed piece of equipment or facility. Because of that, Revu is very adaptable to a variety of different workflows. We were actually originally started about 12 years ago, where users asked us for the ability to create 2D PDFs directly from applications such as SolidWorks and AutoCAD. So we originally provided ways that users could create those PDFs without actually having to print out paper and mark them up on their own. After they did that for a couple of years, they then requested ways to be able to mark up the drawings together and be able to use things such as a tool chest and the Markups List for being able to reuse these markups, track all the relevant markup data. So we built Revu as a standalone desktop application that lets users mark up drawings, save those markups to the tool chest, and use what we call the Markups List for tracking information. And we'll get into those details so you'll see what those all look like. And then a few years after that, users said, great, we love all the markups, we love being able to track the information, but we want to be able to do this collaboratively. So we built a tool called Bluebeam Studio, which allows multiple users to mark up a set of documents together at the same time in real time. And again, we're going to look at that here closer to the end of the webinar. I do want to mention that we're going to be using the context today for today's workflows on a set of P&ID drawings. But you, in fact, might be using a variety of different types of documents. You could be using specs or isometrics or PFDs, or maybe they're more like civil drawings that actually have a scale to them. Revu is specifically oriented around PDF documents. That means if you're able to convert documents into the PDF file format, and we have a whole variety of conversion tools available, you'll be able to mark them up using our tools in Bluebeam Revu. This, of course, is within the larger context of a paperless project, and a paperless project can take on a variety of shapes and sizes depending on an organization and depending on the personnel within an organization. I do want to mention that we have a pro services team that is available to provide consulting services to help you understand ways in which Revu can be applied so you can take your projects paperless. But this could be anywhere from basic paper-based equivalencies in the digital world, things such as marking up or highlighting, or it could be more advanced workflows like hyperlinking or document management, where you're really beginning to leverage more of the powerful tools in Revu. And again, we'd love to be able to have that conversation about what that looks like specifically for your projects and your team. But today we're going to focus on 5 primary pillars of Revu. You can think of these 5 main aspects that really hold up a lot of the workflows. And we're going to be in and out of these 5 items quite a bit today. But if any questions specifically come up regarding these, please enter those into the Q&A portion and we'll be sure to address those. So today we're going to talk more about our customizable profiles and ways of manipulating the interface so it makes the most sense for your projects. We're also going to talk about document comparison and overlay for being able to track changes between 2 sets of documents. We'll cover our markup tools, including the tool chest, the markups list, and importing comments. And then finally, we'll talk about studio sessions for real-time collaboration. That's the portion that I mentioned earlier where we're able to mark up a set of documents together with multiple users. So let's actually jump into the interface of Revu. And let me walk you through a few parts of the interface just so we can get our bearings. You'll notice that up here at the top, we've got a menu bar. When I click on the different menu items, you'll notice that I have icons that change here on the command bar. These different icons allow me access to different functionalities in Revu. For example, this is going to provide me some of my line markup tools. I can hover over any of these, select them. I can also use the quick key associated with that, or I can also pin that respective item to any of the toolbars. Now notice I only have 3 toolbars turned on at this point, but I can turn on additional toolbars if necessary. Actually, one of the things I'd like to do is to change my profile. I want to be able to have more functionality available to me right now. So to do that, I'm going to come up here to View, and I'm going to select the Profile Manager, and just to the right, there's a little drop-down arrow. I'm now going to toggle from the Simple Profile to the Oil and Gas Profile. And you'll notice that my interface has changed a bit here. I now have a toolbar here along the top with quite a bit of functionality, another toolbar here on the right-hand side with some tools, and you'll notice that here on the left, I have my tool chest open, where I've got some preloaded valves and symbols ready to be used. These panels here on the left that are represented by these little blue handlebars can be closed, collapsed, or opened up depending on the work that we're working on. You'll see here this drop-down. These 9 profiles give me ways of being able to customize the interface either based on workflow or based on project. This is a really great way to be able to quickly access standardized tools. What's nice about the profiles, they can also be saved and deployed with the software. That way your entire project team can have a standardized approach when using the interface of Revu. Let's actually make a profile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the Profile Manager. We'll select that right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select Add. A quick dialog comes up here, and let's just call this LNG Project ABC. This happens to be the standard project that we're going to work on, and we want to make sure that everybody can have our same tool sets, our custom line styles, our custom hatch patterns, our custom columns, and any of that information that's tied to that profile is going to be a part of that small file. So I'm going to select OK right there. You'll notice that the screen flashes. We're now simply working on this profile, which is really just a copy of the oil and gas profile. If I'd like, I can export it. And you'll notice that it's just a small, what we call a BPX file. It's a small little spec file that we use for being able to tell Revu what tools to put in what location. So what we're going to do today, we're going to work out of that profile as our new standard profile. And again, because this can be deployed with the software, you can actually require that to be the one profile that's viewed by users so they know that they're always working on the latest set of standardization for that project. Up here in the top left corner, you notice that we have this orange triangle. Now this orange triangle opens what we call tab access. Now these 17 items all open up in the left, right, and bottom panels that are represented by these little blue handlebars that I mentioned earlier. These 17 items are really where you're going to be doing a lot of your heavy lifting in Revu. These are things like the Measurements tab, the Thumbnails tab, the Studio tab. We certainly could take quite a bit of time talking about all those. We're going to be in a few of them today. But if there's anything in here specifically where you're interested in learning more information, obviously we've got some great resources on our website, but please let us know because we want to make sure that we can highlight those in future webinars. I just want to start with a couple of them here. I want to talk about file access. File access is just a quick way to access your files. You'll notice I've got a place where I can pin folders. I've got a list of custom categories as well as a list of my recent files. These recent files are great. It's going to give me a nice thumbnail of the file as well as the absolute location where this file is living. Now, because we do have integration with SharePoint and ProjectWise, these will also reference SharePoint and ProjectWise files. And instead of seeing a local C here representing that this is on my local computer, I would see an SP or PW letting me know. So I do want to mention too, one more thing that I love about the pinned folders is just with a single click, this is going to take you to the entire folder structure where those files are living. The reason I want to show you this approach that we've taken to file access is that this is a direct result of customer feedback that have said to us, look, there needs to be a better way to be able to access files and quickly access folders, create custom categories. So we want to make sure that we're always listening to our users and that we're making tools that make the most sense for what they need to get out of Revu. If at any time you find that there's ways that Revu can be improved, please head right on up to Help and under Contact and select Make a Suggestion. Every single one of the suggestions sent in gets read by our product management team and will be responded to. So we absolutely want to make sure that we're hearing the requests that are coming in. So I'm going to open up a couple files here. I think this will give us a good place to start, and then we can talk a bit more about some of the tools in Revu. Now you'll notice up here at the top, this is what we call our tab navigation. These are almost very similar to a web browser in that these are multiple files. These are individual files. You'll notice that this one actually is a 2-page document right down here, and it's the paper space of this document is 36 inches by 24 inches. It does already have some pre-existing markups on it. But I can just simply tab over to the other document. This is a single page document, again, 36 inches by 24 inches. I can independently work with these documents based on the workflow at the time. So if I'm working on dual monitors, maybe it makes sense to me to be able to compare two documents together. So let me open up my revision B here. I can take my revision B of this P&ID, detach it from the top, and put this onto a secondary monitor. Then on my primary monitor, I can keep the revision A open on the left. Maybe that's a way that I want to work in that particular instance. So because those are all independent and can be worked with, and because they're PDFs, you can really imagine the different ways that you can use that. I also want to mention too that any of these tab access items that I mentioned previously, these can all be detached and put onto a secondary monitor as well. So this happens to be my tool chest that we can use if it makes the most sense for me to have my tool chest over there. I'll say a lot of our users like to put the thumbnails tab, for example, on a secondary monitor. That way they can see all the pages in little thumbnails broken down. Something I do want to mention as part of the basic navigation of the drawing, my center mouse wheel is a zoom. That way I can zoom right into a specific location on the drawing. And my left mouse button is a pan. This is going to allow me to pan across the drawing and then quickly zoom in and out. Now, one of the things that I can do, I can also split my screen vertically. So you'll notice here on the left, I've got my revision A, and on the right here, I have my revision B. I can view these two documents independent of each other, or I can come down here to synchronize, and I can select that option. And now you'll notice that both sides are synchronized together. This will allow me to quickly view one section of the drawing and verify any changes that might have occurred with the other. This is just simply tracking the two drawings together. That same functionality also works when detaching the tabs as well. So you can detach the tabs, put them on separate monitors, and still synchronize them for verifying any changes between the two. Now this would be a manual process for being able to verify any changes between the two documents, but let's say we want to do that automatically. We have some tools in Revu that will do that. To access those, head up to Document, Comparison, and the two options are Compare Docs and Overlay Pages. The first one, Compare Documents, is going to do a side-by-side comparison and annotate any differences. It just asks us to queue up document A and document B. This drop-down here gives me these 4 files that are really just a list of the 4 files available up here at the top. So let's queue up document A, and then let's queue up document B, and then we'll select OK. And what Revu is going to do, it's going to look for any differences. It's going to highlight those differences out and annotate them on the drawing. So for example, it detected that there was a difference here in the actual name of the file. Well, we've got the Rev B here and the Rev A on the label, so we detected that in the title block. But any of these other changes are also annotated with a highlight, a cloud markup that we can then use for checking across between the two documents. Now this is great for a side-by-side comparison, but sometimes we want to stack two documents on top of each other, almost like a light table. We can do that with the other document comparison. So again, under Document and Comparison and Overlay Pages. What Overlay Pages does, it allows you to bring in multiple documents, assign those documents to a specific color layer, and then stack them on top of each other. In the event that the documents don't happen to align correctly, you can use a tool called Align Points, which will allow you to pick 3 reference points on one document and 3 reference points on the other documents, and it will use those for stacking the documents up. So I'm just going to add in the open files here. We'll remove some of the files that are not necessary here, and we're just going to have revision A come in as a red layer, and revision B is going to come in as a blue layer. and then we'll select OK. Review is going to prompt me to open the Layers tab. So yes, we'll open up the Layers tab. That opens up here on the left-hand side. And you'll see that we now have 2 layers available, as well as some content that we can observe. Now the content that's the same is going to come in as dark lines. That's because it's the blue layer on top of the red. But any differences between the 2 layers are going to be annotated by that respective color. So I can turn off a layer and see what colors are related to that, and see what the content that in fact is in variance from the other layer. So this is a nice way for being able to manage changes and view any differences between the documents. So I'm going to close out of the overlay page here, close this tab, and I want to talk a little bit about markups and some of the tools that are available in markups. Now, we've been doing markups for a long time, and we really feel like markups are the language that people are able to use and communicate. So we want to make sure that the markups are accessible, they're easy to use, and that they can be customized and reused. So I want to walk you through a few of the existing markups that are on this drawing and just talk about how they are made. You'll notice here that this is a basic cloud where it's highlighting out some options here on the document that need to be deleted. If I click on this cloud, I can also open up the right-hand panel and view the properties of that cloud. Here we've got the author's name, the subject, and some of the physical image properties of what that cloud looks like. One of the tools that we find a lot of our engineering review users like is just the ability to highlight. This is just the option where you can let that underlying content pop right through. And that highlight is a very nice tool, even using with a polyline tool or a rectangle tool. Great way to be able to see that content underneath. You'll actually, in fact, notice here in the systemized portion off this E100 drum that we have the highlight polyline turned on as means of being able to use a highlighter. You can kind of think of that as a new way of using a highlight tool rather than actually using a physical highlighter. So let's talk a little bit about Symbology. I do want to mention that we've got some symbols here ready to be used. You'll notice that these symbols are now located here on the drawing, but they were pulled from the tool chest. And the tool chest is accessible here on the left-hand side. So in the tool chest, we've got ways of being able to save and reuse Symbology markups on the project, and again, save those back to the profile. So these symbols all do come stock loaded with Revu, but we've really designed these to sort of get the creative juices flowing so you can start making your own symbols and use those based on your project requirements. Now, sometimes the case may be where there isn't necessarily a symbol already in the tool set that you want to be able to use. That's not a problem. Let me show you a little trick for creating your own tool set. I'm going to come down right over here to this oil water separator. And this is a part of the PDF content. Now, I could make this on my own with a text box and a polyline, but let's say I just want to take a quick snapshot of it and add it to my tool chest. To do that, I'm going to come up here to Edit, Snapshot. I'm going to click points right around that little item there. I'm going to right click and paste, and you'll see that I now have a black line version, exact copy of that element. Well, now I can right click that markup, select change colors, and I can change the source color from black to red. This is now going to give me a red line version of it that will be much easier for marking up. Now I want to be able to save that to my tool chest. I can do that one of two ways. I can either right click that markup and select add to tool chest and place that right here in valves, which I'll do, or I can drag and drop it right here from my recent tools right down here into valves. That's another option I can use for saving that. Now that it's there, maybe I want to be able to change the subject on it, because currently the subject on that markup is just snapshot. So to do that, I can actually toggle from symbol mode here into detail mode, and you'll see that I now have all of the subjects and any comments related to any of these items. So I'm going to come right down here to my oil water separator, double click in snapshot, delete that. And type in oil water separator, and I'm ready to go. So now I can reorder these, place these anywhere in this tool set I'd like, or even put it into a different tool set, whatever makes the most sense for my project. Now, something I do want to mention in regards to the tool chest is the ability to use markups in what's called drawing mode or properties mode. So for example, we do have this comment here that says to provide the globe valves per directive. And I have that located right here in my recent tool, so I can bring that right out to be used again. But most likely, I will not use that exact same size and shape of markup again. So instead, I can toggle this between drawing mode and properties mode by just double-clicking that markup or selecting this toggle mode. When it's toggled and it's now into what's called properties mode, I can now define a new line here on the drawing. And it's going to remember all those same properties. And I'll just say, provide bottoms pump. And I now have a comment that's using all those same properties, but with a new shape. I do want to take a moment here just to mention that there are custom line styles that are supported by Revu. We happen to have a gas line here and another line that is available for modification. I just want to show you where those are at. We won't go through actually adjusting all of those and setting those up. But if you come over to the Polyline Properties and then under Appearance and select Style, you can scroll right down to the bottom and select Manage. And then you've got an option here for being able to add in new .blx files and creating those. That's again a small spec file. It's related right to the profile and it lets you share and collaborate on custom line styles with other users. Now I do want to mention too, and I guess I just have to say that a lot of our engineering customers do like the ability to use our full screen crosshairs, but I can turn on some full screen crosshairs here in Revu, select the recent Polyline tool, and then by clicking points and holding down the Shift key, it's going to give me nice, straight 45-degree angle lines for quick placement of additional lines on the document. So these are some of the basic markup tools in Revu. One of my recommendations is if you haven't downloaded a trial, to download a trial and take some time just using those different markup tools. I think you'll find that they're fairly user-friendly and you're able to do quite a bit of communication using those different methods. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to talk a little bit more about the Markups list and tracking information related to markups, and then eventually, well, that's going to move us right into Studio. So I want to talk through a context that we're going to use with this blank revision B P&ID. So here's the workflow or the scenario. This might sound familiar to a lot of you. I've got this document. I know that I have to compile the comments from multiple commenters. I have at that point emailed out the document. They've marked it up on their own. Maybe they've used Bluebeam Revu or another PDF markup application. They've then emailed it back to me. Well, now I have 3 separate sets of markups that I need to compile onto one document. I can use a tool called Import Comments to be able to bring all of those comments in together at the same time. To do that, I'm going to go down to the Markups list, and I'm going to select the option here for Import Comments. When I select Import, it's going to bring open an open dialog that will then let me select the respective comments that need to be brought in. So for example, I have some mechanical, piping, and safety comments that I want to make sure are all compiled at the same time. Now I'm going to just click on the preview here so you see them. You'll notice that my mechanical comments are in blue, my piping comments here are in purple, and my safety comments are in green. Don't worry too much there about the colors. They're really just intended to indicate that these are 3 separate disciplines on 3 separate PDFs. If I select all three of those at the same time, I can select Open, and you'll see that they'll automatically be added all together to this one document. So now in my document, you'll see that I now have those all compiled. And if I open up my Layers panel here on the left-hand side, again, accessible through Tab Access and Layers, you'll notice that I can then toggle on and off the layers as they pertain to those respective disciplines. This is because they were on their own layer when they originally came in from their originating document. But now I've got access to the Markups list. And the Markups list is really where I can begin doing a lot of my tracking. You can think of the Markups list almost like a spreadsheet of markup data. I've got columns, headings, rows that all can be filtered, sorted, and then I can build reports off of this information. So for example, if I want to just sort by my subject, I just click on subject and I can see that I now have 7 mechanical items here. Same concept applies for layer. I can sort by layer by just clicking on the layer heading as well. Now if I click here on columns, you'll see that I have all of these columns available for use in Review. Now all of these come stock loaded with Review except for the bottom column. This bottom discipline column is what we call a custom column. This is a column that I have added in as means of being able to add in unique information per markup. I'll show you how I added that. Right next to those columns is a Manage Columns blue cogwheel. Select that Manage Columns cogwheel and select Custom Columns. And then I have the ability to add in a new column. The options for the column are text, number, formula, date, choice, and check mark. Really, those 6 items are going to let you do pretty much any sort of additional data that you might need to add into a markup. So in this particular instance of discipline, this is a choice column, and you'll see that I have 5 respective disciplines now assigned as the choice for those markups. So I'll show you how that's used. I'll just cancel out of those. Let's take these piping comments, for example. Let's say I want to take a couple of these piping comments. You'll notice that when I click on that piping comment, it's actually going to zoom me to the location on the drawing where that comment is being placed. We'll take this piping comment here. I'm going to double click, and let's just say that controls actually needs to take a look at this item here. Controls needs to look at this item as well. So I could just simply by double clicking assign it to controls. If I need to assign any items in batch, that's not a problem. I can just hold down the Shift key, select all those items, come over to my right properties panel, and you'll notice that in my properties panel, I now have the custom option for discipline, and then I can assign them to the group as necessary. Let's just, for the sake of this illustration, we'll assign these to mechanical. Now this means I've got some piping items that need to be addressed by the mechanical team, some that need to be addressed by the controls team. What that now means is that I can then turn on a filter. So if I want to filter out some of my markups, I'll hit the filter button, come here to the right and select the piping group. Now I just see I have my 6 items there from the piping team. And then I'm going to then select the discipline that I want to view. Let's just view the controls items. And now I only have a set of comments there for the controls. Easily, I can just toggle between the two as it makes the most sense for this filter. Now you'll notice in the drawing that my markups that are not included in the filter that have been filtered out are now grayed out of the document. That's a customizable setting in the properties that can be modified. But now with this in place, I can actually build a report. So I'm going to come here to Summary, and I can either build a CSV or XML Summary, which this is an Excel-friendly file type. So a lot of you may be using Excel for tracking comments and for logging those. So this might be a good way to be able to import that information in. Or I can make a PDF summary, which is a more graphical summary. I want to show you what that looks like for now. So if I select PDF Summary, I've got some options here. What I want to do is I want to append it to the current PDF. I do want to create some hyperlinks, and I'll show you what those are here in a second. And let's just rename the title here. We'll say these are piping comments, and the style on it will be flow. Let's make the preview on it a little bit larger so you can see it. And the padding of it is just the PDF content behind the markup, just determining how much of that content we're going to see. When I select OK, Review is going to take those 4 comments, package them up together. It's going to put them on a second document that's then appended to the first page that we were working with. So let me show you that here in the Thumbnails tab. We've got our original P&ID here, and then we've got an 8.5 by 11 report that's just been added onto it. Now you'll see that when I open this up, I now have some good information. This is all the information that was pulled from the markups list in the respective columns, and I also have a nice thumbnail of that markup. You'll see that my hand has a little H on it. This is actually a hyperlink. So when I click on that markup, it's going to take me directly to that markup back on the drawing. So it just took me from page 2 back up to page 1. So it's a really quick way to be able to see the different items as they need to be included back onto the drawing. Now this report can be emailed to any user on a PDF application that supports hyperlinks. They just be able to click on that. That's not specific to review, so we're able to then help others be able to communicate on the drawing set to see any issues that might come up, and then use these reports as they are supported by the ISO standard specification for hyperlinks. Now, I do want to say, in the event that there's some changes that need to be made, or some of the authors need to communicate with some of the other commenters, it could be a little bit more difficult being able to use a tool like this, because this is a very linear workflow that works great, assuming that everything is in place in the design review cycle. But the reality is, we know that there's back and forth commenting that needs to be done, notifying that needs to be done, and ways of being able to collaborate with other users. So again, the import comments is a fantastic tool, certainly something I would recommend if it meets the requirements of a specific project. But we also have a tool called Bluebeam Studio that allows you to do a lot of this work collaboratively at the same time in either a cloud-based or an on-premise based server. So let me access Studio here, and we'll talk through those tools. So I'm just going to close out all these other tabs here. We won't save those. I'm going to close this panel too. And I'm going to open up Studio here in the right-hand panel. Now, Studio, again, is one of these 7 icons up here on the left-hand side. It doesn't change when toggling through the different menu options. It's a pretty big deal to us. We feel like there's a lot of really great efficiencies available through Studio. But Studio just requires a simple login information and account to be created, and then I can begin to upload and create my either sessions or projects. Now, I'm going to click the little connection button here. It's going to prompt me for my email and password. Now, I've already set up my account. It's ready to go. It's very easy to create an account. Again, this is happening at studio.bluebeam.com, which is Bluebeam space on the Amazon S3 Secure Cloud server. And it is free for anybody to create an account and to begin using Studio. Select OK here. And we're just going to be logged into my Studio account. You'll notice that it's broken down into 2 primary sections. Sessions here, where I have my sessions that I've created and the sessions that I've attended. And I have here my projects. These are the projects that I've started. Now, projects is a streamlined document management system built into Studio. We're not going to focus on projects today. We're going to be talking primarily about sessions. But projects is a really great way for storing documents for quick access by other users. Maybe they're in the field, even using iPads, where there's an offline mode for being able to sync down files, mark them up, and then sync them back up into the cloud when connectivity is restored. But in sessions, you can think of sessions as really as the real-time markup component, where multiple users are marking up documents together at the same time. You'll see that there's also a unique 9-digit ID assigned to each session, which can be distributed to other users. They can then enter in that 9-digit ID and jump right into the session for marking up. Let me show you how a new session is created, and then we'll jump into a session that I already have going. So I just select Start and New Session. And this basic dialog comes up where I can enter in the session name, upload in the files that I'd like to be collaborated on. Again, this could be done later in the process. I've got an option for the different permissions that would apply globally to everybody who's coming into the session. Again, that can be modified later, and it can also be modified by respective attendees' email address or group. I've got a way to be able to restrict attendees by email address. This means that I have to intentionally either invite someone into a session or authorize them to come into the session because they received the 9-digit ID from another individual. So it's basically a way of being able to lock down a session so just not anyone can access the session by entering in that 9-digit ID. I also have a way to be able to set a session expiration date as well. That way the marking up functionality will cease to be available, and then myself as the admin can go in, compile the markups, look at anything that needs to be cleaned up, and then potentially finish that session and create a report from it. So I already do have a session going that I want to jump into. This is the P&ID review session that we'll look at. And you'll see that we've got some markups on here ready to go. And we also have some attendees. I just want to walk you through a few parts in the interface here on the right-hand side and talk to you about really why we designed them to be the way that they are. You'll see here that I've got an attendee list listing out all the various attendees that are in or out of the session. The attendee, of course, Omar is in the session. His name is highlighted there, but we do have two users who are grayed out, both engineer, who has a status of finished, and owner, who has a status of reviewing. This is really important because what this does is this means that we now have the ability to see who all has been in the session at one time or the other. Users had said to us, we want full accountability in the session. We want to make sure that we know who's had access to the session and when they have been in there. So I can in fact see exactly when the owner came in and out of the session by even coming over to the record down here and viewing the attendees. That way I'll see exactly who came into the session and at what time. So that way we know nobody can say I didn't see the documents or I haven't been in the session, because we know who has been able to attend the session and when. This also separates the ability of the functionality of Studio from things like a screen share. So right now we all decided to meet together at this time in this WebEx, and you all are watching my screen, which is fine. However, once this webinar is complete, this screen will go dark, we'll all be done, and you'll be able to view the recording. The difference is that with sessions is that even though Omar is in this session right now marking up the drawing, I can even leave this session, and that's not a problem at all. Omar can continue to mark up the drawing however he needs to. The owner can come into the drawing. The engineer can come in and continue their markups and process in that. I'm actually going to zoom into this area down here where Omar happens to be working, and we're going to just see some markups popping up, and we'll see some colors changing on these markups as well. This is all happening in real time as Omar is placing these specific markups. Which is really great. We can see that he just placed a call out there that says move pump. I again have full control of my screen, so I can manipulate this and let Omar do the work that he's doing. And he can come and go however he needs to. But let's say in fact I want to watch Omar, or I want to follow him. Because we happen to be in the session at the same time, I have the ability to specifically follow what Omar is doing. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to hover over Omar's name, and you're going to see that I got a couple orange feet right here. When I click on those, I'm now actually viewing Omar's screen. So that little orange cursor there is his cursor that we're watching. So we're just seeing what he's doing. We'll be able to see any markups that he places on the document, because that's part of something he wants to draw attention to. So we see that he just placed a thermal well there off the tower, and he just changed the line number on it and then can move the screen for us. So that's a really great tool. If I just need to take control back, I just click back on the document or scroll out, and now I'm back to control, and Omar can keep doing the work that he's doing. That's just a nice little screen sharing functionality built in, but certainly not required for users to be in the session at the same time together. You can upload up to 100 documents into a Studio session. You've got quite a bit of space to use. I believe each document can be 100 megabytes each, so you've got plenty of room for the documents there to be using for those sessions. If you run out of space, you can just start another session. There is no cost for Studio. It's all part of Revu, so you can upload all those documents in and begin using that space. Now, a question that does come up often is, does someone need to own a seat of Revu to be able to collaborate in a session? And the answer to that is no. You do need to own a seat of Revu in order to start a session. But once that session is started, any user can come in, assuming they have that 9-digit ID or an invitation into the session, and can mark up that document for free using our free viewer view. Once they're in the session, you'll see that they will have then all of the markup tools available to them, and they can then mark up the document just like we would be doing today. But then as soon as they exit the session, they no longer have that markup functionality with that free viewer view, and that's available for download on our website. And the reason we did that is we really didn't want cost to be a barrier to allowing people to be able to collaborate together. We feel like that's really important, that people can have access to the tool chest, the markups, and all that really great information, but yet still be able to do that without actually having to own a seat of Revu. So I do want to mention a couple things here. So if I were to come in at any point here, I certainly have the ability to mark this document up based on the permissions. That's not a problem at all. But if I select any other user's markups, Omar's, for example, we watched Omar place this thermal well, you'll see that the handlebars on this specific markup are grayed out. I cannot change or modify anyone else's markup. Now I could copy it. If I wanted to right click and select copy, I could right click and then paste. And now I have my own version of that I can place, but this is my markup. I cannot change or modify anyone else's markup in the Studio session. Again, this is part of the full accountability aspect of Studio. So Omar, again, can come and go from the document as often as he needs to, place his markups, and he knows that as soon as a markup is placed on the document, he can rest assured that nobody else is going to change that or manipulate that markup. In fact, you'll notice that there really isn't even a way to save the session because it's just not necessary. There's no need to be able to save that information because all those markups are getting posted back to the server. We do have an option, depending on permissions, to be able to save as, which is saving down a local copy of it. But again, that's a localized copy of what's happening as a master set of documents are being collaborated on in the cloud. I do want to mention too, there is the markups list here at the bottom that has the same functionality that we looked at before as far as filtering and sorting and creating various reports, either the CSV, XML, or PDF summary reports, which is a really nice way to be able to summarize some of that information. But in regards to communicating in a session, there's a couple different methods that are available that are worth exploring. And I do want to mention the ability to set statuses. So right down here, you'll notice that we've got 3 separate sequences that have then been placed here on the document. I'm going to come over to the markups list and we're going to view the statuses of those respective sequences. When I click on that, you'll see that that sequence then gets highlighted here for me. I can actually change the status of this valve by double-clicking on the status, select valve state, and select open. You'll notice that then when that happens, the markup changes to green. I now have the state as well as the author, the date and time that that particular status was set. I can then go through and set the states on any of these other markups as it makes sense for this particular project, and it's going to post there in that record. But I am not necessarily the author of that markup. These markups were placed by engineer. Omar can actually change the status of these markups as well. And that's going to then add in a second line item so we have the full accountability. So we know when I set it to open, and then we also know when Omar set it to close based on this time and date stamp. And it's changing the color of the markup respectively. So while we're not deleting the markup or making major modifications to it, you do have the ability to set a custom state to the markup and then have the color of that markup change based on other collaborators being able to change that information. But let's say that Omar made mention to add an oil water separator to that location. That's fine. Maybe I have a comment. Again, I could come over to my callout tool and I could draw out a callout and place a callout on his callout, but that's going to get very cumbersome and becomes a difficult way of having a dialogue. So we wanted to build in a way that users can actually have a threaded conversation on a markup without actually cluttering the drawing with more dialogue. So if I right-click that callout, I can select reply, and I have a little pop-up box that comes up out of the markups list, and I can say per owner requirements. And you'll notice that when I come back to the markups list and I select that specific callout that we have, let's find that specific reply here, that we have the original callout that Omar placed here. He is the author. This is the date and time that he placed that specific callout with the comments. And then we have my reply that was added right in here to that callout. So the per owner requirements comment that was placed by myself at this date and time. Again, we want to make sure that the document can be very legible. It's easy to have a threaded conversation. And so multiple users have the ability to reply to a specific markup. Now, one more final thing I do want to mention about Studio is that we do have a notification structure built into Studio. So let's say, for example, Omar put together this move pump markup here. If I need to notify somebody else, let's say the owner needs to be notified of that particular item, I can right-click that markup, and I can select Alert Attendee. I can select Choose, and then from the list, I can select the other individuals in the session. So I'll select Owner here, select OK, and what's going to happen is we're going to take that markup, we're going to put together a notification, and we're going to email the owner with a nice notification with some highlighted information that the owner will then be able to use that information for making a judgment call on whatever needs to be notified. Now, Omar has already sent me a notification. I want to show you what that looks like. That's right down here in the notification pane. You'll see that there's actually 2 notifications that Omar has alerted me to that I have not viewed yet. But when I click on them, you'll notice it's going to take me right to the location in the drawing that Omar alerted me to. It's now that particular notification is now in a red state, so I can right-click it and mark it as unread. That way I can almost use it almost like a to-do list if I'd like. But it's really just a way to be able to be notified of items that are pending. If I were to leave the session, you'll notice that I would have a little small number 1 next to my studio icon letting me know that I have 1 pending notification waiting for me in that session. I do want to show you what that email looks like. So in the case that I haven't been in the session for a few weeks, or I haven't logged into Studio for a couple days, and I don't see the number of notifications waiting for me, or I don't actually come into the session itself and see the notifications in this tab, I will be getting an email directly to my email address. You can see this came in from the Studio server there to Luke at bluebeamsoftware.com saying I've got a markup alert waiting for me. It gives me the session and the session ID, and then it shows me the thumbnail of what Omar wanted to alert me to, as well as a small bit of information that's available. Now notice this is also a hyperlink. If I click on that link, it's going to take me right into that session where that specific markup is located. So there's a lot of tools that are really built into Studio, and I know we went through this very fast, but one of my recommendations, again, like testing out some of the markup tools, is just creating a Studio account, putting in some sample documents, and inviting a couple coworkers, a couple colleagues to be able to mark up a session with you. I think you'll find that there's a lot of really fantastic ways of eliminating some of the space and time boundaries that really end up becoming prohibitive for us to be able to collaborate with other users on a project. So that wraps up the Studio portion of the webinar. We do have some questions that we do want to address, and one of the questions that came in was, where do the files live? That's an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. Right now, you'll see that I am logged into studio.bluebeam.com. Again, that's Bluebeam space on the Amazon S3 Secure Cloud Server. And by default, an installation overview is pointed to that location for Studio. We do have an option called Studio Enterprise, which will allow an organization to essentially host all of that same collaboration behind their own firewalls. Studio Enterprise comes with a variety of additional admin tools, ways of changing and adjusting attendee information, document information, document size. A lot of those preferences can be set using the Studio Enterprise option. There is also a toggling method where users can actually toggle between various Studio servers for accessing their files based on the project that they're working on. So that's a really good option for users that don't necessarily have the ability to use cloud-based file storage systems such as studio.bluebeam.com. But we want to make sure that users can still do that same collaboration just within a different IT architecture structure. It's mentioned that there is another question that's come up here. The other question is, how do I share a tool set? That's a great question. In fact, let me show you. Let me just jump right back into the interface here. I'm going to open up my tool chest. Now, we talked before about being able to share a profile. Now, if I come over to View and Profiles, we've been saving new tool sets to this LNG project ABC. If I select Save Profile, all of those tools that we've added in, such as the oil water separator, are now being saved in there. Any custom line styles would be saved into that profile as well. So we're able to save that and use that. But maybe the case is that you just want to be able to save a specific tool set, maybe just this valves tool set, for example. So if I just want to save and share that, I select the little blue cogwheel right next to the heading of valves. I select Export. And then I can just save it on my desktop or another location. You'll notice it's being saved as a .btx file. Again, it's a small spec file that can be shared or distributed to other users. I can email this out to my team. They can look at it at Outlook. They can save it locally and import it in, or just open it, double click it in Outlook for read-only state. That way they're able to view all of those tool sets. That way you don't necessarily have to share an entire profile, but if you just want to share the parts of the profile, you can do that. The same works for the custom hatch patterns, the custom columns, such as that discipline column that I showed you previously, and custom line styles. It's really nice to be able to share just portions of that rather than the entire profile, depending on the project requirements. Well, I certainly thank you all very much for your time. A couple things that I do want to mention. We've got some great training resources available to you all. You'll notice that on our website, we've got free training tutorials. These are a whole variety of videos. We also have a fantastic Bluebeam Basics self-guided training course that allows users at their own pace to go through a training course. It's $79 per user. Each user gets a year's worth of access to that. It's roughly 8 hours of content, depending on the pace that someone elects to go through that program. But it's a really great way for getting new users up and running and familiar with the basics of Revu. We, of course, have live instructor training options that include on-site training and web-based classroom training and web-based one-on-one training. So I would certainly recommend any of those options for your teams. We also have the professional services team, which I mentioned at the beginning, that can come in, take a look at workflow, can take a look at what objectives would be, and be able to provide customized solutions for that. It's a really great option. They can also create customized assets such as profiles, tool sets, and things of that nature if it feels that it doesn't make the most sense for that to be done there in-house. We can provide the services to do that. I do want to mention too, we've also got our Bluebeam Extreme Conference coming up here in July here in Los Angeles. We will actually be having an oil and gas track focusing on a variety of workflows. But that's a great conference. We've got a lot of really good resources there, interacting with other users, case studies, customer panels, training sessions, keynote. Really great time to get together and talk through some of the tools in Revu and be getting ready for the future and what's happening next. We also are going to be having two extreme conferences in Stockholm and London, happening in September and October. If you happen to be in those locations, we'd love to have you come out for either of those events as well. Again, thank you very much for your time. We certainly appreciate it. If there's additional content you'd like for us to cover, please send that in. We would like to be aware of how we can make these webinars address any of the issues and items that you would like to have us focus on. But our next webinar is going to be on Tuesday, June 23rd. We look forward to seeing you there. Well, we should cover some additional content. I think we might take some time to talk a little bit about batch link and some custom sequences. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that and make that available. But again, I'm Luke Prescott. Thanks to you from Omar Sheikh as well. We certainly appreciate your time with us, and take care.